Get into the kitchen. Right now. Don't ask questions. Just move. She didn't know his name. She didn't know what he'd done or who wanted him dead. All Emily Hart knew was that the man parked across the street had just opened a trunk, and nothing good ever came out of a trunk at midnight. So she grabbed the stranger by the collar, dragged him through the kitchen door, and threw herself on top of him. 3 seconds later, the entire front of the diner disappeared in a wall of fire and shattered glass. She saved his life before she knew it was worth saving. And that one decision, that one reckless, instinctive, completely irrational decision, changed everything. If this story already has your heart pounding, hit subscribe and follow me all the way to the end. Drop a comment right now telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. You knew. I guessed. There's a difference. Most people don't guess fast enough to save a life. Most people, Emily said, brushing plaster dust off her shoulder, aren't paying attention. She almost didn't take the late shift that night. Her feet hurt from a double the day before. Her landlord had called twice about a check she hadn't mailed yet. She had half a frozen pizza at home and a show she'd been meaning to finish for 3 weeks. Every reasonable bone in her body said call in, stay home, let somebody else deal with the midnight crowd. But she needed the money. So she tied her apron, drove the 12 minutes to Marlowe's diner, and walked in at 11:45 p.m., which meant she was standing behind that counter at exactly 12:47 a.m. when the black SUV pulled into the parking lot and just sat there with the engine running. Nobody got out, Emily noticed. She always noticed. 3 years of late shift work had rewired something in her brain. She clocked people the way other women clock sales racks. Fast, thorough, and without looking like she was doing it. The SUV sat there for 3 full minutes. Engine running, nobody moving. That's not a customer, she thought. That's someone waiting for a signal. She picked up the coffee pot and moved to the far end of the counter so she had a better angle on the parking lot. Routine, perfectly casual, just a waitress keeping busy. The front door swung open at 12:50. 4 men walked in. The first 2 split without speaking, one to the booth near the front window, one toward the back near the restrooms. Clean, practiced, no hesitation. Emily's father had been Army for 22 years, and she'd grown up watching men move like they were covering exits. She recognized it instantly. Oh, she thought, oh, that's not good. The third man planted himself just inside the door, arms crossed, jacket zipped to the throat despite the fact that it was 63 degrees outside. The fourth man walked to the counter and sat down on the stool directly in front of her. She'd seen powerful men before. Marlowe sat off a stretch of highway that occasionally drew the kind of businessman who thought a greasy diner was charming, slumming it with a company card and a story to tell at the club. She knew the type. Expensive watch entitled Posture, the particular laziness of men who'd never been told no. This man was not that type. He had none of that laziness. He sat like he'd chosen to sit, like he'd evaluated the stool, found it acceptable, and decided to honor it with his presence. His suit was dark, perfectly cut, and torn at the left shoulder in a way that looked recent, not worn. His face was in its late 40s, the kind of face that had been handsome before life had gotten hold of it and carved it into something harder and more permanent. He didn't look at the menu, he looked at her. Coffee, he said. His voice landed like a period at the end of a sentence. No question mark. No please. Emily reached for the pot. Cream or sugar? Black. She poured. He watched her hands, not in a threatening way, in an assessing way, like she was a variable he was running calculations on. Rough night, she asked. Not yet, he said. She set the pot down. Your friends want anything. They're not here for food. Then what are they here for? He looked at her steadily. Insurance. Emily held that word in her mouth for a second, tasted it, didn't like it. She moved to the other end of the counter and started restacking cups that didn't need restacking. From that angle, she could see the parking lot clearly through the pass-through window. The black SUV was still there, engine still running, and now there was a second car, dark sedan, parked across the streetlights completely off. She was almost certain it hadn't been there 10 minutes ago. She stared at it, casual, just a woman looking out a window. The driver's door opened. A man got out. He didn't come toward the diner. He walked to the back of the sedan and opened the trunk. Emily's entire body went cold. She didn't know exactly what he was doing. She couldn't see clearly enough, but there was something about the way he moved, deliberate, unhurried, the posture of a man who knew precisely what he was about to do and felt nothing about it that hit her in a place below logic. Somewhere ancient and mammalian that didn't need reasons. Move, said every cell in her body. Move right now. She walked back to the counter. The man in the suit was still on his stool, hands wrapped around his mug, still watching her in that measuring way. She leaned forward and kept her voice at a near whisper. I need you to come with me. He looked up slowly. Excuse me. Into the kitchen. Right now. I don't think you understand. There's a man across the street, she said, dropping even lower, locking eyes with him. He just opened his trunk. He's not getting jumper cables. I need you in the kitchen in the next 30 seconds, or I walk out the back door without you, and whatever happens next is on you. Something shifted in his face. It wasn't fear. She didn't think this man knew how to produce that expression anymore. It was something sharper, rapid reassessment. He was recalibrating her. You're serious, he said. 25 seconds. He stood up. He didn't say anything to his men. He didn't gesture. He simply stood, and somehow that was enough. The man near the window was already rising the one near the restroom, already moving the one by the door, already reaching inside his jacket. Emily turned and walked toward the kitchen. Fast. Not running meant panic, and panic meant chaos. She pushed through the swinging door, and she heard him right behind her. Denny, she said the second she was through. Get on the floor. Denny looked up from the grill. What? Floor, now, behind the prep table. Emily, what are you? Oh, Denny. He dropped. He didn't know why. He'd worked with her long enough to trust the tone. Victor came through the swinging door. His two men were right behind him. From the dining room, she could hear the man near the front window shouting something in a language she didn't know. She grabbed Victor's arm and pulled him low behind the heavy steel prep table, and she put her hand flat against his chest to hold him there. The world came apart. The blast wasn't just sound. It was pressure, a physical thing that hit the building like a fist, like God deciding this particular structure had gone on long enough. The windows blew. The walls shook. Somewhere above them, pipes screamed, and the lights went out all at once, replaced a second later by the dim red emergency strips along the floor. Emily's ears were ringing so loud she thought she'd gone deaf. She was on the floor. Both of them were. She didn't remember falling. For 3 seconds, there was nothing, no thought, no pain, just the ringing and the weight of the world pressing down. Then, are you hit? Victor's voice, right next to her ear. Low controlled, absolutely calm, and that calm terrified her more than the explosion had, because no one who just lived through an explosion should sound like that. Unless being calm was a survival skill, they'd practiced so many times it had become reflex. No, she said. You don't? No. He was already moving, already up on one knee, scanning the kitchen through the dust and haze. Gregor. Here. One of the men, she'd later learn his name, was Grigor, pulled himself upright, arm wrapped around something that was bleeding. Dimitri's down. How bad? A pause that lasted exactly 1 second too long. He's not getting up. Victor's face didn't change. Not 1 millimeter. But something in his eyes went to a place that was very far away for just a moment and then came back. The dining room, Emily said, already moving. Don't, Victor started. She was already through the swinging door. The front of Marlowe's was gone. Not damaged. Gone. The whole window wall, the front booths, the little sign above the register that had spelled out Marlowe's in red neon since before Emily was born, erased. A hole where the world used to be, smoke pouring in the street beyond visible and burning. But in the back corner booth, the couple she'd brought eggs to maybe 4 minutes ago, they were still there. The woman was pressed against the wall, crying, blood running down her arm. The man was on his feet, pulling her up. Back door, Emily shouted across the wreckage. Through the kitchen. Go right now. They didn't argue. Shock makes people obedient. They ran. Emily swept the room, fast, methodical, the way her father had taught her to check a campsite before leaving, make sure nothing's left behind, and she confirmed what she already suspected: the tables nearest the blast had been empty. Slow night. She'd resented the slow night an hour ago. She'd never resent it again. She went back into the kitchen. Victor was on his phone, speaking Russian fast, flat, no emotion. His hand was on the wall map that Gregor had pulled from somewhere, finger tracing routes. The couple from the booth burst through the swinging door, saw Victor's men, and stopped dead. Eyes forward, Emily said, stepping between them and the armed men like it was the most natural thing in the world. Back door right there. Get 2 blocks away before you call 911. Go. They went. Victor ended his call. He looked at her with an expression she still couldn't fully decode, something between calculation and something that had no business being on the face of a man like him. The people who did this, he said, they're not finished. Meaning what exactly? Meaning that was a first strike. If I survived, and I did, they'll send a team on foot within the next 6 to 8 minutes to confirm the kill. He held her gaze. We need to be gone in 4. Emily's brain ran the math in real time. 4 minutes. Running with a man I don't know from a disaster I didn't cause. Denny, she said, he goes out the back now with Gregor. And the man who, she glanced toward the door. Dmitri. Victor's jaw tightened. He stays. A pause. We can't help him. The words hit her somewhere complicated. She didn't know the man. She didn't know any of them. But we can't help him, spoken with that particular flatness. Not cruelty, just the practiced vocabulary of a man who had learned to close certain doors quickly or not survive. That was the moment Emily understood with full clarity what kind of world she'd just stepped into. 3 minutes, Victor said. She untied her apron and dropped it on the floor. The SUV moved through the city fast and quiet. No sirens followed them, not yet. Victor sat across from her, forearm resting on his knee, watching the city slide past the window. Gregor sat in the front. Denny, shaking silent ash still in his hair, sat beside Emily with his hands clasped tight in his lap. You're going to take him home, Emily said to Gregor. Gregor glanced at Victor. Victor nodded once. Thank you, Denny said very quietly to no one in particular. Then he looked at Emily. I don't understand what just happened. Someone tried to kill this man, she said, and I moved him out of the way, that's all. Denny stared at Victor. Who are you? No one you need to know about, Victor said. That's not Denny. Emily put her hand on his arm. Trust me, the less you know, the safer you are. Go home. Don't talk to anybody tonight except the police, and only tell them what you actually saw. You were in the kitchen. There was an explosion. You got out the back. That's your whole story. Denny looked at her for a long moment. And what's your story? She glanced at Victor. Victor looked back at her with that unreadable expression. I'm working on it, she said. Sonepto. They dropped Denny 4 blocks from his apartment. Victor watched until the door closed behind him. Then he turned back to Emily. Victor Hargrave, he said. She blinked. Sorry. My name. You've been in a car with me for 15 minutes, and we haven't been formally introduced. It seemed overdue. She almost laughed. The absurdity of it, the formality, the precision in the middle of all this. Emily Hart. I know, he said. I looked at your name tag while you were pouring my coffee. Of course you did. It's a habit. I look at everything. Clearly not everything, she said. You didn't see the car across the street. His expression shifted, the faintest tightening around the eyes. Not anger, something closer to respect, with an edge of discomfort in it. The discomfort of a man not used to being told things he missed. No, he said. I didn't. Why not? I was watching the wrong threat. He paused. I was watching the front. They came from across the street. It was a misdirection. He looked at his hands. I've been doing this for 20 years. I should have. He stopped. You can beat yourself up later, Emily said. Right now, tell me where we're going and why I shouldn't be getting out of this car. He looked at her. You can get out. I won't stop you. You also said I'm a loose end. You are. So getting out means you're alone, unprotected, connected to a scene that's going to be all over the news in 40 minutes with men who might identify you as a survivor actively looking to close loose ends. He held her gaze. I won't stop you, but I would advise against it. Emily looked out the window. The city moved past, ordinary, indifferent, entirely unaware that her entire life had just taken a 90-degree turn at full speed. You don't know what you're made of until you're tested. Her father's voice, clear as a bell. Okay, Dad, she thought. Let's find out. She turned back to Victor. 2 conditions, she said. He raised one eyebrow, just one. First, I need to know Denny is actually safe, not your word confirmation. A call, a text, something. Done. Second, she leaned forward slightly. Don't manage me. Don't give me the version you want me to have. If I'm in this, and apparently I'm in this, I want the truth. All of it. Even the parts that scare you. The silence that followed was the longest 10 seconds she'd ever sat through. The parts that scare me, he repeated slowly. Yes. He looked at her for a long time. Outside, the city slipped past. Somewhere very distantly, she could finally hear sirens. Most people, he said at last, don't ask me that because they don't actually want the answer. I'm not most people. No, he said quietly, you're not. He turned back to the window. There's a man named Alexei Kozlov, he said. His family has wanted me dead for 3 years. Tonight was their most serious attempt. And the reason they knew exactly where I would be at exactly what time, in exactly that location. He stopped. The muscle in his jaw worked once. It's because someone inside my organization told them. Emily felt the words land one by one like stones dropped into still water. Someone who works for you, she said, set you up. Yes. Do you know who? Oh, the silence answered before he did. I have a list of 4 names, he said. By morning, I need to make it 1. Emily sat with that. 4 people who might have sent a bomb to kill this man. One of them had, and she was now riding through the dark city with all of it pressing against her like weather. Arena, she said suddenly. He went very still. Mara said the name on the phone when she thought I wasn't listening, Emily said carefully. She said this is about Arena. Who is that? The longest pause yet. So long, she thought he had simply chosen not to answer. She was someone, he said finally, who should still be alive. His voice was the same, flat, controlled. Every word measured, but his hands, she noticed his hands for the first time. Still on his knee, completely, perfectly still. The stillness of something held down by force. The Kozlov Bratva, Emily said softly. They took her. He didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it. He didn't need to. Emily looked out the window and said nothing more. Some things didn't need a response. Some things just needed to be acknowledged, witnessed, held for a moment before the next crisis demanded your full attention. Outside, the city was beginning to wake up to what had happened at Marlowe's diner. She could see the glow of it now reflected in the clouds above the south end of the city. Orange light where orange light shouldn't be. Her diner, her counter, her neon sign. Gone. She breathed in, breathed out. Okay, she told herself, okay. She had no idea, not yet, that the man sitting across from her in the dark was not just running from his enemies. He was running from himself, and that she was the first person in 3 years who had made him feel like maybe, just maybe, that race didn't have to end the way he decided it would. But that was a truth that would take time to surface. Tonight, there was only survival. Tonight, that was enough. The safe house smelled like coffee and old decisions. Mara had made a fresh pot without asking anyone. That was the thing about people who'd been in crisis long enough. They stopped waiting for permission to do the small things that kept everybody human. Emily wrapped both hands around the mug and let the heat move up her arms while Gregor laid out a second phone on the table, and Victor stood at the far wall with his back to the room, talking to someone in a voice too low to follow. She counted the minutes since the explosion. 41. 41 minutes since she'd grabbed a stranger by the collar and dragged him out of the way of a bomb, and now she was sitting in a blacked-out apartment with armed men she didn't know drinking coffee from a pot she hadn't made, waiting for someone to tell her what happened next. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. Almost. Denny made it home, Gregor said, dropping the phone in front of her. He's inside, lights on, door locked. She let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Thank you. Gregor looked at her for a second longer than necessary. He was big, broad through the shoulders with the careful stillness of a man who'd learned the hard way that too much movement draws attention. But his eyes were not unkind. You did good tonight, he said. Most people freeze. I'll freeze later, she said, when there is time. He almost smiled, turned back to the table. Victor ended his call and came to sit across from her. He moved with the same economy he'd had all night. Nothing wasted, nothing unnecessary. He set his phone face down on the table and looked at her directly, which she was beginning to understand was his version of a courtesy. This man looked at everything. When he looked at you specifically, he was choosing to. I need to tell you something, he said. Okay. The man across the street tonight, the one with the trunk. He paused. His name is Kane. He's Koslov's head of field operations. He's been running jobs for the Bratva for 11 years, and in 11 years, he has never, not once, failed to confirm a kill. Emily set down her mug. Then why are you still alive? Because he didn't expect you. The words sat between them like something physical. He had the timing right, Victor continued. He had the placement right. What he didn't account for was a waitress who reads a parking lot better than my own security team. He looked at her without any softness in it, just honesty, clean and direct. You are the single variable that was not in his calculation, which means right now you are the thing that makes him most dangerous. Because he'll want to correct his mistake. Because men like Kane do not accept variables. They eliminate them. He held her gaze. He knows your face. You were behind that counter for what, 3 hours before we arrived? 2.5. There are cameras on that block. He'll have your face by morning. He'll have your name by noon. He stopped. I want you to understand exactly what that means. It means I can't go home, she said. It means you don't have a home to go to. Not that one. Not for a while. She took that in, turned it over, looked at all its edges. All right, she said. Victor blinked, just once slightly too slow the tell of a man who'd braced for argument and hadn't gotten one. All right, I'm not going to cry about my apartment right now, Victor. Tell me about the 4 names. Mara across the room looked up from her laptop. Gregor went very still. Victor looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper, real paper handwritten, which told her he trusted digital records even less than he trusted people, and laid it on the table between them without unfolding it. If I show you this, he said, you become more involved, not just circumstantially, materially. I think we passed circumstantial when I tackled you behind a prep table, she said. His jaw did that thing, that one tightening motion she was already beginning to read as the place where his emotions lived when they had nowhere else to go. He unfolded the paper. 4 names. She read them without touching the page. Thomas Weil, Gregor Ash, Pavel Durnin, Sasha Morin. She looked up. Gregor was one of the names on the list. She looked at Victor. He was already watching her face, watching her find it, watching her process it. He'd put the paper down knowing she'd see it, testing something. Does he know? She said carefully, keeping her voice neutral. He knows he's on the list, Victor said. All 4 of them know. I told them this morning, before tonight. Before tonight, she repeated. You told them this morning that one of them was a traitor. Yes. And then tonight someone tried to kill you. Yes. So either telling them accelerated the timeline, or the person I told panicked, Victor said, called Kozlov, pushed the strike forward before I could identify them. He paused, which actually narrows the window. Emily leaned forward. However, because the original strike was planned for 2 days from now. I had intelligence on a meeting, a location, a time. Tonight was improvised, rushed. He looked at the list. Whoever made the call to Koslov, they did it within 6 hours of me telling them they were suspected. That's panic behavior. Not professional. Gregor, Emily said, lowering her voice. He's been with me 11 years. That's not an answer. No, Victor said. It isn't. From across the room, Gregor spoke without looking up from what he was doing. I didn't make the call, Emily. She startled slightly. She hadn't realized he could hear them. He had good ears, or the room was quieter than she thought. Maybe both. Can you prove that? She asked. Gregor turned. His expression was not offended. It was tired in a very specific way, the tiredness of a man who understood the question and respected it even while hating it. I was the one who pulled Dmitri out of the blast zone, he said. Dmitri is dead. He was my friend for 9 years. A pause. If I'd made the call, I'd have made sure I wasn't in the building. Emily held his gaze. He didn't look away. She turned back to Victor. That leaves 3. Thomas Weil is in Berlin, Victor said. He's been there for a week. He could have made the call remotely. Pavel Durnin. He's here in the city. I haven't been able to reach him since 8 this evening. And Sasha Morin? The pause was 1 beat too long. Sasha, Victor said, is my second in command. The room went very quiet. Emily looked at the name on the paper, Sasha Marin. The handwriting was the same as the others, precise, controlled, slightly smaller than you'd expect from a man Victor's was. But there was something in the way he'd said that name, a specific weight to it. How long, she asked. 12 years. Do you think it's her? Another pause. Longer. I think, he said slowly, that I don't want it to be, which is exactly the kind of thinking that gets men like me killed. Mara spoke from across the room without looking up. Pavel's phone just came back online. Victor was on his feet before Emily could process the sentence. Where? He's moving, south side near the river. Mara's fingers moved over the keyboard. He's not calling anyone, just moving. Running or walking. Speed says driving. Victor looked at Gregor. Something passed between them that required no words. 11 years compressed into half a second of eye contact. I need to talk to him, Victor said. He won't stop if he sees your number, Gregor said. He'll stop if he thinks I don't know he's running. Victor picked up a different phone from the table. A clean one, Emily could tell by the way he handled it, careful, like it hadn't been used for anything yet. He dialed, put it to his ear. The room held its breath. 3 rings, 4. Then a voice slightly breathless, the particular quality of someone trying to sound calm while driving fast. Victor. Pavel's accent was heavier than Victor's. Eastern European, she'd place it as Ukrainian if pressed. Pavel. Victor's voice was perfectly level, warm even in a way that didn't reach his eyes. I've been trying to reach you. I know, I'm sorry. Did you hear what happened at the diner? I heard, Victor said. Where are you? A slight hesitation, half a second, maybe less. At home. Why? Emily watched Victor's face. Nothing moved. I need you here, Victor said. Now. How quickly can you get to the secondary location? Another pause. Longer. Give me 40 minutes. Come alone. And Pavel, if you've heard something, if you know something, now is the time. Silence. 4 full seconds of it. I'll be there in 40 minutes, Pavel said, and hung up. Victor lowered the phone. He's not at home, Mara said. No, Victor agreed. He's heading east now, away from here, Varm. Let him go. Victor set the phone down with the careful precision of a man controlling something. He'll circle back or he won't. Either way, he just made a decision. He looked at Gregor. It's not Pavel. Gregor frowned. How do you know? Because Pavel is afraid. You heard his voice. He's scared of me. That means he's not the one who tried to kill me. He's the one who's terrified of what I'm going to do when I find out who did. Victor moved back to the table. Pavel knows something. He's running because he knows something, and he doesn't know which side is safer to be on. So we bring him in, Gregor said. We give him 2 hours to decide he's more afraid of being alone than of coming to me. A pause. Fear is a homing device. Give it enough time, it always brings them back. Emily stared at him. You're very calm about the fact that one of your closest people might be a traitor. I'm not calm, he said. I'm controlled. There's a difference. He met her eyes. You understand that. She did. She understood it exactly. It was the same thing she'd told herself about panic and water, about freezing and drowning. Different words for the same discipline. She recognized it in him the way you recognize a dialect of your own language spoken by a stranger. She didn't say any of that. She just nodded. Rest, he said. You've been on your feet since before midnight. I'm fine. Emily, his voice dropped half a register. Not softer, exactly more direct. Like he'd taken out something he'd been speaking through and was speaking plainly now. You're running on adrenaline and it's going to drop. When it does, I need you functional, so rest. She looked at him for a long moment. He looked back. 1 hour, she said. 1 hour is sufficient. She took the blanket Mara handed her and settled into the chair in the corner, shoes on back to the wall with a clear line of sight to the door. Her father's habit. She'd had it since she was 17, and she'd never been able to shake it. She closed her eyes. She didn't sleep, but she rested, and that was enough. 43 minutes later, the door opened. She was on her feet before anyone said a word. It was Pavel. He looked like a man who had driven around the city for almost an hour, arguing with himself and lost. He was somewhere in his 50s, heavy set with a face that had probably been pleasant once and was currently running several days behind on sleep. His coat was wrong for the weather, too heavy, mismatched with his shoes, like he'd grabbed things in a hurry without looking. He saw Emily first, stopped, looked at Victor. "Who is this?" "Someone who saved my life," Victor said. "Sit down, Pavel." Pavel sat. He didn't take his coat off. Men who are thinking about running keep their coats on. "Tell me what you know," Victor said. "I don't know anything, I just..." Pavel. Victor's voice didn't rise. It did something more effective than rising. It went completely flat. The flatness of a man who has decided to stop using pleasantries as scaffolding. "I've known you for 14 years. I know what you're afraid of nothing voice sounds like. This isn't it. Talk to me." Pavel looked at his hands. His jaw worked. He was fighting something, the particular internal war of a man who has information and has been sitting on it while trying to decide if sharing it will save him or destroy him. "2 weeks ago," he said finally, "I got a call." "From who?" "Sasha." The name landed in the room like a stone through ice. Victor didn't move, didn't speak. Pavel looked up at him. "She called me. She said she needed to talk privately, not through normal channels. She said she had information about the Kozlov situation and that she didn't trust everyone in the organization with it." He swallowed. "She wanted to meet, just the two of us." "Did you meet her?" Victor asked. His voice was perfectly even. "Yes." "What did she tell you?" Pavel hesitated one more second. Then something in him gave way, the last internal argument lost. "She told me that she'd been in contact with Alexei Kozlov, that he'd approached her 6 months ago, that he said he had something on her, something from her past, and that he was using it." Pavel's voice dropped. "She said she hadn't given him anything real, that she'd been feeding him false information to buy time. But she was scared, Victor. She was genuinely scared, and she asked me not to tell you." The silence in the room was total. "She asked you," Victor said slowly, "not to tell me. She said she needed time to deal with it herself. She said if you found out, you'd..." Pavel stopped. "I'd what?" "She said you'd handle it the way you handle everything, and that she'd end up like Irina." The name moved through the room like a change in air pressure. Emily felt the way every person in the space registered it differently. Gregor's shoulders dropped half an inch. Mara's typing stopped. Victor's face did something complex and very fast that she couldn't fully follow, like watching weather change. "She said that," Victor said. "Yes." "And you believed her?" Pavel pressed his hands flat on the table. "I didn't know what to believe. I know what happened with Irina. I know what you carried after. And I know that Sasha..." He stopped. "Sasha loved Irina too. They were close. She's been afraid of you since that night. Not because of what you did, because of what you became." Victor was very still. Emily watched him and thought, there it is. That's the thing he's been carrying. The thing Mara had hinted at. The thing underneath the control and the flatness and the carved stone face. Irina's death hadn't just broken something in him, it had changed how the people around him saw him. Made them afraid, made them keep secrets. And that fear had created the exact gap that Kozlov had stepped into. "Where is Sasha now?" Victor asked. "I don't know," Pavel said. "She stopped responding to my messages 3 days ago. That's when I started to think..." He swallowed again. "I thought maybe Kozlov was done using her, that maybe she'd given him something real and he didn't need her anymore. And people Kozlov doesn't need anymore." "Don't stay in circulation," Gregor finished quietly. Pavel looked at him, nodded once. Victor stood up. He walked to the window, not looking out, just standing with his back to the room, his hand flat against the wall beside the blacked-out glass. Emily made a decision. She stood up, walked across the room, and stood 2 feet behind him, close enough that he could hear her without anyone else in the room needing to. "Victor," she said quietly. He didn't turn. "She might still be alive," she said. A long beat. "You don't know that." "Neither do you." She kept her voice low and steady. "But if she was feeding Kozlov false information, if she was doing that to protect you even badly, even while lying to you about it, then she's an asset to him only as long as she's compliant. The moment she stops being useful, he either flips her completely or he uses her to get to me," Victor said. "Yes, which means she's more valuable alive right now than dead." Another long beat. You think like a strategist, he said. I think like someone who's been listening to you for the last 2 hours, she said. I'm just running your own logic. He turned then, looked at her from a distance of about 18 inches, which was close enough that she could see things in his expression that the rest of the room probably never got to see: the exhaustion underneath the control, the grief underneath the anger, the thing that was almost hope and almost terrified of being that. If she's with Kozlov, he said, voluntarily or otherwise going after her means walking directly into his space. I know. That's exactly what he wants. I know that too. And you're still suggesting it. I'm not suggesting anything, Emily said. I'm giving you your options clearly. That's all. What you do with them is yours. He looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then he stepped past her back toward the table. Gregor, he said, I need Sasha's last known location. Everything from the last 72 hours. Phone card activity, vehicle, everything. That'll take an hour, I know. Start now. Gregor moved immediately. Victor looked at Pavel. You're staying here tonight. Pavel looked relieved enough that Emily almost felt sorry for him. Yes, of course. And Pavel, Victor's voice was quiet, precise. When this is done, you and I are going to have a conversation about what it means to keep things from me. And it is going to be an extremely uncomfortable conversation. Pavel nodded. He looked like a man who had been expecting much worse and was still not sure he wasn't going to get it. Emily poured herself more coffee. The clock on the wall said 4:17 a.m. She thought about her apartment, her half a frozen pizza, her show she'd been meaning to finish. She thought about the name Irina and the way Victor had said it in the car, like something kept wrapped in a dark place. She thought about Sasha Marine wherever she was right now, and whether she was scared and whether she was alive. She thought about Kane, the man with the trunk, the man who never failed to confirm a kill. Who was out there right now? Who had her face? She sat back down in her corner chair. Shoes on. Back to the wall. Outside, the city was fully awake now, the early morning, kind of awake, that belonged to bakers and nurses and people walking dogs in the gray light before the rest of the world showed up. Ordinary people moving through an ordinary Tuesday with no idea what was burning just below the surface of the city they lived in. Emily looked at Victor across the room. He was bent over Gregor's laptop, one hand braced on the table, reading something fast, with the focused intensity of a man who has decided that grief is a luxury he will pay for later. She thought, who were you before Irina? She didn't ask it, not yet. Some questions needed to earn their timing, but she filed it, tucked it away in the same quiet place where she kept all the things she was not yet ready to say out loud. Because something told her in the irrational, inarguable way that the body knows things the mind hasn't caught up to, that she was going to have time to ask it. That despite everything pointing toward disaster, despite the bomb and the dead man and the traitor and the assassin with her face saved to his phone, she was going to get through this. She didn't know how she knew. She just knew. And in the meantime, there was coffee and 4 names on a piece of paper. And somewhere across the city, a woman named Sasha Morin, who might be the key to all of it or the lock that sealed them all inside. The next move was coming. It always did. Gregor found Sasha at 5:43 a.m., not through her phone that had gone dark 3 days ago, like Pavel said. Not through her card's last transaction was a gas station 40 miles outside the city, paid cash, which meant she'd been planning to disappear before anyone noticed she was gone. He found her through a parking garage camera 2 blocks from a building that Victor owned but hadn't used in 8 months. A building that Sasha would have known about. A building that, if you were scared and running out of options and still half trusted the man you'd been lying to, might feel like the closest thing to safe. Victor looked at the still frame on Gregor's laptop for a long time without speaking. In the image, Sasha Morin looked nothing like a traitor. She looked like a woman who hadn't slept in 3 days. Coat pulled tight, head down, moving with the particular hunched urgency of someone who checks over their shoulder without knowing they're doing it anymore. She was maybe 50, with close-cropped, silver hair, and the kind of posture that under normal circumstances said competent, decisive, in charge. Right now it is said cornered. She's been there the whole time, Gregor said, since at least yesterday morning based on the timestamps. She's waiting, Victor said. For what? Victor straightened up. For me to find her. He picked up his jacket. Let's not make her wait any longer. Emily stood up. I'm coming. Victor looked at her, the look that meant he was running calculations. Victor, she said before he could speak, Kane has my face. Sitting in this apartment doesn't make me safer. It just makes me stationary. I'd rather be moving. The calculation finished. Stay close to Gregor, he said. Do exactly what he says exactly when he says it. No improvising. I thought improvising was how I saved your life. It was, he said, which is why I'm asking you not to do it again. Once is a miracle, twice is statistics. She grabbed her jacket. The building was a 10-minute drive. Victor didn't speak for 9 of those minutes. Emily sat beside him in the back of the SUV and watched the city wake up in real-time lights coming on in windows, a delivery truck backing into an alley, a woman walking a small dog, with the resigned patience of someone who had done this every morning for 15 years and expected to do it 15 more. Ordinary. All of it ordinary, and underneath it this. How long has she worked for you? Emily asked. 12 years, Victor said. She came to me from a government position, intelligence background. She was the best I ever hired. A pause. She knew Irina. They were, he stopped, chose, close. Pavel said she was afraid of you after Irina. Yes. Were you different after this? The 9-minute silence broke at exactly the wrong place. They were pulling into the garage. Victor looked at her, and for just a second, one unguarded second, his expression was something she hadn't seen on him yet, something that wasn't controlled at all. Yes, he said simply. The door opened. They moved. The building was 9 floors of old commercial space, mostly empty. Gregor had confirmed Sasha on the 6th floor through heat signature, one-person stationary, in the northwest corner unit. Victor went first up the stairs, Gregor behind Emily. Nobody talking. Their footsteps on the concrete were the only sound. Victor stopped at the 6th floor door, looked back once. Emily nodded. She didn't know exactly what she was confirming, but the nod felt right, and he seemed to accept it. He opened the door. He walked in alone. Emily and Gregor waited in the stairwell with the door cracked 2 inches. Through the gap, she could hear footsteps. Then a door opening. Then silence was. Then a woman's voice, low, wrecked the voice of someone who had been alone with their fear for long enough that hearing another human being speak almost broke them open. I knew you'd come. Of course I came. Victor's voice, quieter than Emily had heard it. You knew I would. I wasn't sure which version of you was coming. Sasha, the one who finds solutions, or the one who... The voice cracked on the edge of something. I've been sitting here for 2 days, Victor. 2 days trying to decide if you'd walk through that door and talk to me, or walk through it and... I'm here to talk. A pause. Sit down. A long beat of silence. Then the sound of movement, someone sitting. Emily looked at Gregor. He was watching the door with the focused stillness of a man managing multiple contingencies at once. He glanced at her briefly and shook his head slightly. Not yet, stay put, and she nodded. Tell me everything, Victor said. From the beginning, all of it. Another pause. Then Sasha began to talk. Her voice came through the cracked door in fragments, not always fully audible, but enough. Enough for Emily to piece it together. 6 months ago, a man who'd approached her at a conference in Vienna, not Koslov himself, a go-between. He'd known things about Sasha's past, specific things, a name she'd buried, a decision she'd made in her government years that had never been formally investigated, but that surfaced in the right way to the right people would end her. Everything. So she'd agreed to talk to Koslov. She hadn't agreed to give him anything real. That was what she told herself every single time. She would listen, and she would feed him things that sounded true but weren't. She would buy time. She would find a way to handle it quietly from the inside without Victor ever needing to know. You were protecting yourself, Victor said. I was protecting myself. Sasha agreed, and the rawness in her voice made no attempt to justify it. And then after enough time, I told myself I was protecting you too. That giving him wrong information was better than giving him nothing. That it kept him satisfied, kept him looking the wrong direction. A pause. But 3 weeks ago, he stopped accepting what I gave him. He said he knew I was lying. He said... Her voice dropped too low to hear. Emily leaned slightly against the door. Gregor touched her arm, careful not pulling her back, just marking the boundary. He said he wanted the location of the Meridian accounts. Sasha's voice came back up. The offshore structure you used to. I know what the Meridian accounts are, Victor said. He said if I gave him that, we were done. He'd destroy the information he had on me. Clean slate. A long pause. I said no. You said no. I said no, and 3 days later he sent someone to my apartment. Not to hurt me, just to show me he could. A man who sat in my kitchen and drank my coffee and smiled at me for 20 minutes and then left. Her voice was shaking. That's when I ran. Silence from Victor. The kind of silence that Emily was learning could mean many things. Anger contained grief, processed decisions made. She couldn't tell which one this was. Why didn't you come to me? He said finally. The pause before Sasha's answer was long enough to be its own answer. Then, because of Irina. The name again, that name that kept surfacing like something that refused to stay submerged. Sasha. She came to you, Victor, when she was in trouble. She came to you and told you everything and you tried to handle it, and she died anyway. Sasha's voice broke for real this time, just once, a single fracture before she pulled it back. I watched you after. I watched what it did to you, and I decided that no matter what happened, I would never put myself in that position. I would never be the reason you. She stopped. I'm sorry, I know that doesn't. Stop, Victor said. Silence. Sasha. His voice was different now. Still controlled, but the quality of the control had changed, like the difference between a locked door and a door that is simply closed. Look at me. A beat. Koslov's people bombed the diner last night, he said, based on information that came from inside this organization. Based on a timeline that moved up after I told my 4 most trusted people that one of them was a traitor. A pause. Was it you? Did you tell him I was at the diner? The silence that followed was the longest of the night. No, Sasha said. Are you certain? I told him nothing after I ran. I haven't spoken to Koslov or anyone connected to him in 3 days. I swear to you. Her voice was steady now. The steadiness of someone who has nothing left to lose by being honest. If someone told him about the diner, it wasn't me. I didn't know where you were going to be. I didn't know anything. Victor said nothing. Emily looked at Gregor. He was absolutely still. Then we still have a problem, Victor said. Yes, Sasha said. You do. Thomas Weil, Victor said. Or Sasha Morin, but you're telling me it's not you. That leaves Thomas, or someone I haven't considered. A sound from Sasha, not quite a word. More like the noise a person makes when they know something and are deciding in real time whether to say it. Victor caught it too. What? Thomas Weil is in Berlin, she said slowly. But he didn't go to Berlin for business. What do you mean? I mean he went to Berlin because someone asked him to go to Berlin. He mentioned it to me 2 weeks ago, said he'd gotten a last-minute request to oversee a deal in person. Said it came from you. I didn't send him to Berlin, Victor said. The silence that followed had a different texture than the ones before it. This one was sharp. He was moved, Victor said. Someone cleared the board, Sasha said. Got Thomas out of the city, got me running. That left only, Pavel and Gregor, Victor finished. Emily turned and looked at Gregor. Gregor was already on his phone, already moving, already 3 steps ahead of where she went. Pavel's location, Gregor said quietly into the phone. Right now, tell me exactly where he is. Emily's chest tightened. You don't think... Pavel was terrified when he came in. Gregor said, phone still at his ear. Too terrified. Like a man who knew exactly what was coming. He listened. His expression shifted just slightly, just enough. He's at the secondary safe house, he said, the one we came from. With Mara, Emily said. With Mara. They both looked at the door. Victor. Gregor said not loudly, just clearly. We need to move. Victor came through the door with Sasha behind him. She was smaller than Emily had expected, compact, precise-looking, even in her current state of exhaustion. She looked at Emily with an expression that cycled through surprise assessment and something that landed close to recognition. You're the waitress, she said. I'm Emily, Emily said. Sasha looked at her for one more second. Then she looked at Victor. She's the one who pulled you out. Yes. Good, Sasha said simply and moved toward the stairs. They went down fast, no talking. The kind of coordinated movement that Emily was starting to recognize as the operating mode of people who had done dangerous things together long enough that words were redundant. In the SUV, Victor called Mara's phone. It rang and rang and went to voicemail. He called the landline at the safe house. 2 rings, then a man's voice that was not Mara's. "Hello, Victor." The name said with that particular emphasis on the second syllable, the Russian inflection on the K landed in the car like a temperature drop. Victor's hand tightened on the phone. His face showed nothing. "Alexa." Emily felt the sound of that name physically. Alexei Kozlov. The name Victor had said in the car the night before, like it was the name of a disease. "Your woman is unharmed," Kozlov said. The voice was almost pleasant, the pleasantness of a man who is very comfortable with what he's holding. "For now. What do you want?" "I want the Meridian account access codes, the same thing I've been wanting for 6 months. A pause. "And I want you, in person. No Gregor, no weapons, none of your arrangements. You alone at the warehouse on Sutter. You know the one. And Mara. Walks out when you walk in." Another pause. "You have 2 hours, Victor. After that, my patience becomes less reliable." The call ended. Nobody in the car spoke for a full 4 seconds. Then Gregor said, "He planned this, all of it. The diner was never the main strike. It was to push you here to this building to Sasha. He needed you moving, needed you exposed, needed you reacting instead of controlling. He used Pavel," Victor said. "Pavel didn't plan the diner, but he's been feeding Kozlov our movements. Not out of loyalty, out of the same thing that made Sasha stay quiet. Fear. Pavel's terrified of Kozlov," Emily said. "Not of you." "Kozlov got to him first," Victor said. "Probably months ago." He set the phone down. "The question is what he actually told him tonight. Did he know about this building?" "He knew about the secondary safe house," Gregor said. "He didn't know about this location." "Then Kozlov has Mara and he has a 2-hour window and he thinks I'll come alone because I have no time to arrange anything else." Victor's voice was completely level, the flatness of a man who had moved past emotion into pure function. "He's correct that I'll come. He's incorrect about the alone part." "You can't bring a team into that warehouse," Gregor said. "He'll have eyes on the exterior. The moment he sees anyone, I know." "So what's the play?" Victor looked at Emily. She felt it before he said it, the direction of the look, the calculation behind it. Something cold moved through her and then settled into something steadier. "No," Gregor said. "Gregor, she's a civilian, Victor. You're not using her as—" "I'm not using her as anything," Victor said. "I'm asking her." He looked at Emily directly. "Kozlov doesn't know your face yet. Kane does, but Kane won't be running exterior surveillance. He'll be inside. To anyone watching the approach, you're nobody. A woman walking toward the building, not a threat." "And once I'm inside," Emily said, "you won't go inside. There's a loading dock on the east side of the warehouse. I need eyes on it. If Kozlov has a secondary exit plan and that's where it'll be, I need to know if there are vehicles staged there. How many men? That's it. Observation only." "Observation only," she repeated. "You tell Gregor what you see via earpiece. You do not engage. You do not approach. The moment you've counted what's there, you walk away." She thought about it for exactly as long as it took to understand that there was no other option that didn't involve Mara sitting in a warehouse getting less safe by the minute. "Give me the earpiece," she said. Gregor made a sound that was not quite a word. Then he opened the equipment bag at his feet and started preparing. The warehouse was on the south end of the city, a working neighborhood, the kind with loading docks and truck routes and legitimate industry that made illegitimate activity easy to hide. Victor's driver dropped him 2 blocks out. Gregor positioned with Sasha, who it turned out was still carrying a weapon despite 3 days on the run, which made Emily feel slightly better about the overall competence level present. Emily went on foot, east approach. Just walking. Coffee cup in hand, Gregor had handed her one from the carrier in the back seat with the particular practicality of a man who understood that the best disguise is always the one that looks like you belong. "Talk to me," Gregor said in her ear. "Walking," she said quietly. "Ordinary block. 2 men on the south corner. They're not trying to hide, which means they're either Kozlov's or they want Victor to see them and think that's all there is." "Noted. Keep going." She turned the corner. The east side of the warehouse came into view. She almost stopped walking. 3 vehicles, 2 SUVs, and a panel van. 4 men visible, and the way they were standing, the spacings, angles told her everything she needed to know about military background and defensive positioning. Gregor, she said, keeping her voice absolutely even. Loading dock, 3 vehicles, 2 SUV, 1 van, 4 men I can see, which means at least 2 more I can't. They're not staged for departure. They're staged for arrival. A beat. You're sure the van's rear doors are facing out? If they were planning to leave, they'd have it turned around. She took one more careful look. And there's someone in the second SUV, driver, keeping the engine running. Get clear, Gregor said immediately. Right now, Emily, walk away. She turned, started walking back the way she'd come. What does it mean, she said quietly, the positioning? Gregor's voice was tight. It means Kozlov doesn't plan to let Victor walk out. He's not here to make a trade. The loading dock team is the exit for Kozlov after the meeting goes the way he's planned it. He's going to kill him. He was always going to kill him. The Meridian codes were never the point. The point was getting Victor alone in a building. A pause. Get back to the car. Tell Sasha everything. She walked faster without running. Her heart was doing something loud and insistent in her chest, but her legs were steady and her hands didn't shake, and she found not for the first time that her body knew how to do things her mind hadn't consciously decided yet. She reached the car. Sasha looked at her and read her face before she said a word. How bad? Sasha said. He's walking into a kill box, Emily said. Sasha closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Then, does he know Gregor's telling him now? He'll go anyway, Sasha said. I know, because of Mara. Because of Mara, Emily confirmed. She got in the car. Is there another way into that warehouse? Sasha looked at her sharply. Why do I? Because the front entrance is what Kozlov is watching. Because Victor going in alone through the front is exactly what Kozlov expects and has prepared for. Emily met her eyes. Is there another way in? Sasha was quiet for 3 seconds. Sub-basement access, old utility entrance on the north side. It's been sealed 4 years, but the seal is external. Bolt cutters would do it. She paused. How do you know about building access points? I don't, Emily said. But I know that the person setting a trap always covers the doors they know about. They rarely cover the ones they've forgotten. Sasha stared at her. Victor said you were a waitress. I was, Emily said. Now I'm something else. What do we have for bolt cutters? What happened in the next 40 minutes moved at a speed that compressed time the way extreme circumstances always do, collapsing the distance between decisions, removing the space where doubt usually lives. Gregor argued. Victor reached by phone, argued harder. His voice dropping into that dangerously flat register that meant he was about 3 words from ending the conversation entirely. Emily waited for both of them to finish. Then she said, Victor, Mara is in there. You are walking into an ambush. I am the one variable Kozlov didn't calculate. Do you want to debate this for 8 more minutes, or do you want to try to get both of you out alive? A silence. Sasha goes with you, he said. She doesn't leave your side. Agreed. And Emily, his voice shifted just a fraction, just enough. This is not the kitchen. I know. No improvising. I'll do my best, she said, which was not she was aware the same thing as agreeing. The north utility entrance was exactly where Sasha said it would be, sealed from the outside with a chain and a padlock that had been there long enough to rust at the edges. Gregor's bolt cutters handled it in 4 seconds. Sasha went first, then Emily, then Gregor, who pulled the door behind them to look undisturbed from outside. Inside, dark closed the smell of concrete and old machinery and something metallic underneath it all. Sasha moved with the practiced quiet of someone who'd done building entry before. Emily stayed right behind her. Gregor covered the rear. Sub-basement, a staircase, 1 floor up. They could hear voices now, not clear muffled by walls and distance, but voices. At least 3 men. And underneath it something else, a sound that might have been movement or might have been a person trying to stay very still. Mara. Emily pressed close to the wall and listened. She was mapping the sound direction distance the way the acoustics of the space distributed it. Old building, mostly open floor, played above them. Sound carried differently in big empty spaces. Second floor, she breathed to Sasha. Sasha nodded. They went up. The staircase opened onto a catwalk, industrial, metal-grated, running along the perimeter of the warehouse's upper level. Below, maybe 30 feet down the main floor. Emily pressed herself flat and looked through the grating. Mara was seated in a chair near the center of the floor, hands zip-tied behind her, absolutely upright, absolutely still, with the magnificent composure of a woman who had decided she was not going to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. Two men stood nearby. Alexei Kozlov was not what Emily had built him up to be. He was medium height, somewhere in his 60s, with white hair and a face that looked almost grandfatherly until you looked at his eyes. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had made many decisions and had stopped being troubled by any of them a long time ago. He was on his phone. "He's early," Sasha breathed, almost inaudible. Emily looked at the time on Gregor's watch. He'd handed it to her before they went in. 43 minutes remaining on the 2-hour window. Victor wasn't due yet, but Kozlov was checking his phone with the satisfied expression of a man who just received good news. Emily's stomach dropped. "Gregor, she breathed into the earpiece. "Victor needs to stop right now. Kozlov just got a message, and he looks pleased. Something changed." A beat. Then Gregor's voice. "Victor's already inside." Front entrance, she felt the floor tilt. "He went early," Gregor said. "He didn't tell me. He went early and alone." Below the warehouse's main door opened. Victor walked in. He looked exactly like himself. Jacket straight, posture hands visible and empty. He walked toward Kozlov with the unhurried certainty of a man entering a room he'd chosen to enter, which was either the best performance Emily had ever seen or the genuinely inexplicable calm of someone who had made his peace with worst-case scenarios. "Victor," Kozlov said warmly, the warmth of a man holding all the cards. "You came early." "I don't like waiting," Victor said. He looked at Mara. "Is she hurt?" "She's fine, cooperative." Kozlov tilted his head. "Mostly." Victor looked at Mara. Mara looked back at him with an expression that said, "I know exactly what's happening, and I'm furious with you for coming, and also I'm so relieved I could cry, and I'm not going to do either." "The codes," Kozlov said. "We need to talk first," Victor said. "We can talk after." "We talk first," Victor said. The flatness, that absolute immovable flatness. About Irina. The room changed. Emily felt it even from the catwalk, a shift in the quality of the air, the way people position themselves differently when a name lands that carries enough weight to rearrange gravity. Kozlov's pleasant expression didn't disappear. It just adjusted, became something more careful. "That's old business." "It's the only business," Victor said. "You want the codes. I want to understand who gave the order. Not who pulled the trigger. Must know who pulled the trigger, who gave the order." "Why does it matter now?" Kozlov said. "Because I've been wrong about it for 3 years," Victor said, "and I need to know how wrong." A pause. Kozlov tilted his head. "You've been wrong. I thought you ordered it, but you've had 6 months to kill me cleanly through Sasha, and you didn't. You've had 12 months through other channels, and you didn't. You had last night, and you failed." Victor held his gaze. "You're not trying to kill me, Alexei. You've been trying to control me, which means Irina's death wasn't meant to destroy me. It was meant to be leverage, which means it wasn't your order that killed her." The silence from Kozlov lasted exactly long enough to be a confirmation. "Then whose?" Victor said. Above on the catwalk, Emily had stopped breathing. Below, Kozlov looked at Victor with an expression that had settled into something that was almost impossibly respect. "You worked it out," Kozlov said. "I needed 3 years," Victor said. "Tell me I'm right." Another pause. "The order came from inside your organization, Victor. 3 years ago, someone who wanted Irina removed because she'd found something they didn't want found. They came to me because they needed it to look external. I obliged." He paused. "For a price." Victor's face showed nothing, not one thing. "What did they find?" "The Meridian accounts," Kozlov said. "Not mine, yours." Emily watched Victor process that, watched his hands, which were still, completely still, but the quality of the stillness had changed. The stillness of a man who has just been handed a truth that reconfigures everything he thought he knew. Irina had found something inside Victor's own organization, and someone inside that organization had decided she needed to die for it. not Kozlov. Someone Victor had trusted. Someone who was still there. Give me a name, Victor said. A name for the codes, Kozlov said. Upstairs, Emily looked at Sasha. Sasha's face was pale in a way that had nothing to do with the dark. You know, Emily breathed. Don't you, Sasha? You know who it is. Sasha didn't answer, which was an answer. Sasha. Emily kept her voice barely audible. If you know who killed Irina, who gave that order, Victor needs to hear it from you. Right now. Not from Kozlov. From you. Below, Kozlov was speaking again, extending the negotiation, buying time. His men were moving small, repositioning, almost unnoticeable. But Emily could see it from above, and it was not good. They weren't waiting for a deal. They were waiting for a signal. Sasha, Emily said, right now. Sasha closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were very clear and very tired. Thomas Weil, she said. Thomas sent Irina to find discrepancies in the Meridian accounts because he needed to know if Victor suspected him. She found them, and she found what they meant. Thomas called Kozlov that same day. She looked at Emily. I've known for 18 months. I couldn't, her voice cracked. I couldn't figure out how to tell him. 18 months. 18 months of carrying the name of Irina's killer. Emily looked down at Victor, standing below 30 feet away, about to trade the only leverage he had left for a name that the woman behind her had been holding for a year and a half. She made a decision. She leaned over the catwalk railing, and she said, not whispering, not shouting, just clearly in the caring voice of someone who had spent years making themselves heard across a noisy diner. Victor, it's Thomas Weil. Every head in the warehouse turned upward. For one suspended moment, half a second, maybe less, nobody moved. The two men near Mara Kozlov's people repositioning on the floor. Kozlov himself, Victor, all of them. Looking up at the catwalk where a woman in a waitress's jacket was leaning over the railing, with her hands visible and her voice absolutely steady. Then everything happened at once. Gregor came through the sub-basement door at a run. Sasha moved along the catwalk with a speed that belied her 3 days of sleeplessness. Victor, in the half-second of universal distraction that Emily's voice had created, crossed the distance to Mara's chair faster than any of the men around him could recalibrate. The next 90 seconds were the most compressed of Emily's life. Sound and movement, in the specific controlled chaos of people who knew what they were doing, colliding with people who'd been caught calculating wrong. When it was over, Mara's zip ties were cut and she was on her feet. Kozlov's men were contained, Gregor's particular skill set applied with professional efficiency. Kozlov himself stood with his hands visible and his expression recalibrated into something that had almost not quite but almost become the closest thing to cornered that a man like him probably allowed himself. Victor stood in front of him. The warehouse was very quiet. Thomas Weil, Victor said. Yes, Kozlov said, and you'll testify to that. A pause. That depends on what you're offering. I'm offering you the option of this conversation continuing, Victor said, which is considerably more than you were planning to offer me. Another pause. Longer. Kozlov looked at the situation around him, at Gregor, at Sasha, at Mara standing free, at Emily still on the catwalk above. His expression moved through several things and settled on the particular pragmatism of a man who has survived by knowing when the math has changed. Thomas Weil gave the order, Kozlov said. He paid me to arrange it, and I arranged it. I have documentation. A pause. Which I will share in exchange for certain considerations. Certain considerations, Victor repeated. I'm 63 years old, Victor. I'm tired. Something genuinely human moved across Kozlov's face for just a moment, worn and real in a way that his pleasantness never had been. I've been in this business since I was younger than your waitress up there. I'd like to stop. Victor looked at him for a long time. Then he said, get me Thomas Weil, everything you have, and we'll talk about your retirement. He turned away from Kozlov and looked up at Emily on the catwalk. She looked back down at him. He said nothing. But his face in that unguarded moment with the crisis suspended and the truth finally surfaced after 3 years underground, his face did something she hadn't seen it do yet. Something that looked, despite everything, like relief. She gave him a small nod. He gave her one back. Mara looked up at the catwalk, then back at Victor, and said in a voice rough with everything she'd been holding for the last 2 hours, I want coffee. Real coffee. Not whatever they were offering me in that chair. We'll get you coffee, Emily said from above. And I want to know, Mara continued, who taught the waitress building tactics? Nobody, Emily said. I just kept thinking about exits. Below, Victor almost smiled. Almost. The ghost of it, the ghost that she was beginning to recognize as the closest he'd gotten in a long time. It wasn't enough, not yet. There was still Thomas Weil, still the Meridian accounts, still the unraveling of 3 years of a story Victor had been telling himself about who was responsible for Irina and what that meant for who he was now. That work was still coming, but the ground had shifted. Something that had been locked had opened. And in the space it left thin as the light coming through a cracked door, but real, stubbornly, unmistakably real, was the possibility that the next chapter looked different from all the ones before. Emily came down the catwalk stairs on steady legs. She had a feeling they were going to need her for what came next. She was right. Thomas Weil landed at the city airport at 6:14 in the evening, which meant someone had called him home. The question was who? Victor knew the moment Gregor showed him the flight manifest pulled through channels that Emily had stopped asking about, that Thomas hadn't come back on his own initiative. Thomas was too careful for impulse, too calculated for sentiment. If he was on a plane back to the city less than 18 hours after the warehouse, it was because someone had told him something that made staying in Berlin feel more dangerous than coming home. He thinks you're dead, Gregor said. Victor looked at the manifest. Then someone lied to him. Someone who wanted him back here. Someone who needed him moving. Victor set the paper down. Kozlov. Gregor nodded slowly. Kozlov called someone after we left the warehouse. We couldn't pull the number clean phone. But 20 minutes later, Thomas Weil booked a return flight. Emily, sitting across the table with both hands wrapped around the chippy Mara had finally gotten, looked up. Kozlov is settling his accounts, she said. He made a deal with you. That means Thomas becomes a liability for him. He's handing him over. By bringing him back to me, Victor said. By bringing him back to a city where you're operational and he doesn't know it. She paused. It's actually elegant. Kozlov doesn't have to do anything. He just makes one phone call and lets the situation handle itself. Mara looked at Emily with the expression she'd been wearing since the warehouse, a kind of steady, recalibrated attention. Like she'd filed Emily under one category when she walked into the safe house the night before and was now quietly updating the entire file. She's right, Mara said. She usually is, Victor said. He said it without looking up from the manifest, which meant he didn't see the way it had landed on Emily, quiet and warm and slightly disorienting like unexpected sunlight. She looked back at her coffee. Sasha came in from the other room. She'd showered and changed. Mara had produced clothes from somewhere with the same unasked, efficient care she applied to everything, and she looked more like herself, which is to say, she looked exhausted but functional rather than exhausted and hunted. She set a laptop on the table. Meridian accounts, she said. I've been building this for 18 months. Everything Thomas moved through those accounts, every transaction, every shell entity. It's complete. She looked at Victor. I was going to give it to you. I kept telling myself I was going to give it to you. But you didn't, Victor said. But I didn't. Her voice was steady. Because giving you this meant telling you about Irina. And I couldn't figure out how to give you one without the other. The room held very still. Victor looked at the laptop. He didn't open it. He looked at it the way you look at something you've been searching for long enough that finding it produces not relief, but a complicated reckoning. All the time spent searching suddenly accounted for suddenly grief. How much did he take? Victor asked. Over 4 years, roughly 11 million. Moved in small increments through 4 different entities, 2 of them legitimate on paper. Sasha paused. He was patient. He never took enough at once to trigger an internal review. Until Irina found it, Emily said. Until Irina found it, Sasha confirmed. She looked at Victor. She was running a routine audit. She wasn't looking for anything specific. She just found it. And she came to me first. A pause. She didn't come to you because she wasn't certain yet. She wanted more evidence. She asked me to help her verify it quietly before she brought it to you. And Thomas found out she was looking, Victor said. Within 48 hours. He had access to the same systems. He saw her query patterns. Sasha's voice tightened. He moved very fast, Victor. Faster than I thought anyone would move. By the time I understood what was happening. She was gone, Victor said. Not a question, just the last sentence of a story that had taken 3 years to finish. Sasha didn't answer. She didn't need to. Victor stood up. He walked to the window, that same window standing that Emily had watched him do in the first safe house. The posture of a man having an internal conversation that required the specific discipline of not moving. His back was to the room. His hands were at his sides. Emily watched him and thought about what it cost to hold something that heavy for 3 years, to carry the wrong story, to grieve, not just the person, but the version of the truth you'd built around them. And then to have it all reassembled in front of you in a warehouse at 6 in the morning by a woman you'd met over coffee 12 hours before. She didn't say anything. Some moments didn't want words. They wanted witness. After a while, Victor turned around. His face was composed, fully, completely composed. But something behind his eyes had shifted, a settling like tectonic plates that had been grinding for years, finally finding their true position. "Where does Thomas land?" he said. "Terminal B," Gregor said. 8:15. Victor looked at the clock. "Then we have 2 hours." He looked at Emily. "I need you to understand something." She met his eyes. "Okay. What happens with Thomas, it won't be clean. It won't be simple. And depending on how he responds, it may move very fast in a direction I can't fully control." He paused. "I'm not asking you to be part of it. I'm telling you that the next few hours have a different weight than last night. Last night was survival. Tonight is something else." "Reckoning," she said. "Yes. And you're telling me because you think I should sit this one out." "I'm telling you," he said carefully, "because you've been making your own decisions since you grabbed my collar over a coffee counter, and I'm not going to stop you now. But I want you to make this one with full information." She thought about it, actually thought about it, not the reflexive, "I'm fine, I'm in that" adrenaline produces, but the real consideration. The kind her father had taught her to do before a race. Know what you're getting into. Know your lane. Know your limits. "I'll stay with Mara," she said, "at the perimeter. If you need eyes, I'll be your eyes, but I won't go in for this one." Something in Victor's expression released, barely visible, but there. "Thank you," he said. It was the first time he'd said those words to her. She noticed. They moved at 7:30. 2 cars timed approach, Gregor and Victor in one, Sasha driving the second with Emily and Mara. Pavel had been kept in a separate room all day, with the resigned compliance of a man serving a self-imposed sentence. He knew he'd earned whatever came next, and he was waiting for Victor to decide what that was. Victor hadn't decided yet. He'd said nothing about Pavel all day, which was its own kind of verdict pending. In the car, Mara sat in the back with Emily and said almost conversationally, 13 years I've worked for that man. You know how many times I've seen him say thank you to anyone?" "How many?" Emily said. "Twice," Mara said. "Once to Gregor, when Gregor took a bullet that was meant for him in Minsk. And now to you." She looked at Emily sideways. "Just so you have context." Emily absorbed that. "What happened in Minsk?" "That's a very long story for another time." Mara looked out the window. "The point is, context. The airport was busy in the particular way of early evening, the overlap of arrivals and departures, people moving in all directions with luggage and intention, and the specific distraction of travel. Victor's people had identified the gate. Thomas Weil was on a direct flight from Berlin business class, scheduled to arrive at the jetway in approximately 14 minutes. Emily and Mara took position at a coffee stand with a sight line to the arrivals corridor. Earpieces in. Mara had produced them from the equipment bag with the same tireless efficiency that characterized everything she did. "Victor," Emily said quietly, "we're in position." "Good," his voice in her ear. "He'll come through the far corridor. Dark coat probably. He travels in dark colors, it's a habit." "How do you know his habits?" "He worked for me for 9 years." A pause with a texture she was learning to read, the specific quality of pain he refused to let into his voice, but that showed up in the silences around his words. "I know all his habits." 11 minutes passed. Emily drank bad airport coffee and watched the corridor. Mara's hand touched her arm. Thomas Weil was medium height, somewhere in his early 60s, with silver hair cut close and the particular groomed precision of a man who managed his appearance the way he managed everything, carefully, deliberately, with an eye toward the impression it created. Dark coat as Victor had predicted. Rolling carry-on. Moving with the easy confidence of a man who had no idea that confidence was the one thing he had absolutely no right to at this moment. I see him, Emily said. Describe position, Gregor said. Far corridor 30 yards out. Alone. Moving toward the ground transport. She tracked him. He's not looking for anything. He thinks he's invisible. He always thought that, Victor said. Thomas Weil walked through the arrivals corridor and turned toward the exit and walked directly into the particular situation that Victor Hargrave had spent 8 hours constructing. It happened quietly. That was the thing that surprised Emily most about it. She'd half expected something dramatic, something loud. Instead, it was simply Victor stepping out of the crowd to stand in Thomas Weil's path, and Gregor 3 feet to the left and Sasha 5 feet to the right, and the quiet geometric logic of the positioning, making it immediately clear to Thomas that the directions he could move had all been pre-decided for him. Thomas Weil stopped. He looked at Victor. Whatever color existed in his face completed its exit. Victor, he said, the same emphasis on the K that Kozlov had used, but where Kozlov's had been the confidence of a man holding cards, Thomas's was the recollection of a man whose cards had just been turned face up on the table by someone else. I heard you were dead, Victor said. I know, it didn't take. He looked at Thomas with an expression Emily could see clearly from 40 feet away, no anger in it, which was almost harder to watch than anger would have been. Just a clean, horrible clarity. Come with me, Thomas. Thomas looked left, looked right, did the calculation. I don't think, Thomas, Victor's voice, the flat, immovable register. We've known each other 9 years. I would like to give you the opportunity to explain yourself before anyone else is involved. That is a courtesy I did not have to offer, and I am offering it. Come with me. A long beat. Thomas Weil was not a stupid man. He was a careful, patient, brilliant man who had embedded himself in Victor's organization for 9 years and stolen $11 million and arranged the murder of a woman who found his secret and hidden it so well that 3 years had passed before the full truth surfaced. That level of intelligence doesn't talk itself out of a corner. It calculates whether the corner is real. He calculated. Then he said, all right, and he came. They used a private meeting room, the kind airports have for business travelers, rentable by the hour, currently rented until morning under a name that didn't belong to anyone. The 4 of them sat at a small table, Victor, Thomas, Gregor, and Sasha, whose presence made Thomas flinch in a way that was its own confession. Emily and Mara stayed in the corridor. Close enough. Emily could hear voices but not words. She didn't need the words. She was watching through the room's small window, watching faces, watching hands, watching the body language of a conversation that had been 9 years arriving. His hands are shaking, she said to Mara. Thomas is boying. Yes. Mara looked at the window. Victor's won't be. She was right. Through the glass, Victor was completely still, hands flat on the table, posture straight, eyes on Thomas with that complete measuring attention. Thomas was talking, had been talking for 3 minutes. His hands moved while he spoke, gestures, explanations, the physical vocabulary of a man building a defense in real time. Victor wasn't reacting, just listening, just letting it all come out. What do you think he's saying? Emily asked. The same thing they always say, Mara said, that he had reasons, that the reasons made sense at the time, that he never intended for it to go as far as it went. She paused. That he's sorry. Is he? Mara considered it seriously. Men like Thomas are sorry they got caught. Whether that's the same thing as sorry, she shrugged, depends on how generous you're feeling. Through the window, Victor said something. Thomas went very still. Then Thomas put both hands flat on the table and his head dropped, not dramatically, just the specific deflation of a person who has run out of language for what they've done. He just told him about Arena, Emily said. Victor just told him what he knows. How do you know? Because that's the moment something stops. She watched Thomas's bowed head. That's what it looks like when a person stops performing their innocence and just stops. Mara looked at her. You know that look. My father, Emily said. It was a different story, same look. She didn't elaborate. This wasn't the moment. After another 4 minutes, the door opened. Victor came out first. He stopped in the corridor, and Emily looked at his face and understood in 1 second that whatever had happened in that room had cost him something, not broken him, nothing like that, but extracted something. The particular toll of confronting a betrayal not with anger, but with full comprehension. He's going to cooperate, Victor said, with everything. The accounts, the documentation, his communications with Kozlov, all of it. An arena, Emily asked quietly. Victor looked at her. He confirmed it. He ordered it. He gave Kozlov the location and the timing, and he stopped, took one controlled breath, and he said he was sorry. He said it like he thought it meant something. His jaw tightened once. It doesn't. No, Emily said, it doesn't. Victor looked at her for a moment. Then he said very quietly so that only she could hear it, she would have liked you. Emily held that, let it land where it needed to land. Tell me about her sometime, she said. The real version, not the version that ended badly. The version where she was just her. Something moved in his face. Yes, he said. All right. He straightened, looked at Gregor. Call our legal contact. I want documentation of Thomas's cooperation on record before tonight ends. And get Pavel on the phone. It's time to have the conversation I've been postponing. He walked back toward the meeting room, stopped at the door, turned back almost an afterthought, and looked at Emily. You said you'd stay at the perimeter, he said. I did. You kept your word. I told you I would. He looked at her for one more beat. Stop being surprised when I mean what I say, she said. He almost smiled. The ghost. The one she was beginning to catalog, beginning to recognize as something he kept in reserve, not because he was cold, but because every expression that reached his face had earned it. He went back inside. Mara stood beside Emily and they watched through the window as Victor sat down across from Thomas Weil again, and the conversation continued slower now. More methodical, the shift from confrontation to extraction. Thomas talking, Gregor recording Sasha, cross-referencing documents on the laptop she'd carried in her bag since the safe house. What happens to him? Emily asked. Thomas. He cooperates fully, provides everything, and Victor decides how much grace to extend. Mara paused. Victor believes in utility over punishment as a rule. He's pragmatic. But this isn't rule. This is arena. Yes, a longer pause. This is different. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Emily said, and Kozlov, the deal holds. He provides testimony, documentation, full disclosure of his arrangement with Thomas. In exchange, Victor allows him to exit the business cleanly. No pursuit, no retaliation. Mara glanced at her. It will offend a lot of people who've been waiting for Kozlov to answer for things. But it closes it, Emily said. Oh, and all of it. The whole chain, yes. Victor's been trying to close it for 3 years. Yes. And the reason it never closed, the reason he kept hitting walls was because he was looking for Arena's killer in the wrong direction, looking outward when it was inside the whole time. Mara said nothing for a moment. Then, he had a saying after Arena. He said, I can survive enemies. It's the ones I trust that I have to watch. And he said it like it was a lesson learned, like he was going to operate that way forever. She looked at the window at Victor on the other side of the glass. But a person can't live like that. A person can't survive on suspicion alone. It makes you narrower. It makes you into something harder than you started as. Emily thought about the carved stone face, the control, the way he measured every word like it cost something. He's been narrowing for 3 years, she said. Yes. Tonight is the first night some of that stops. Mara looked at her. Possibly, she said carefully. It depends on what he does with it. Understanding a thing and healing from it are very different timelines. I know, Emily said, but you have to understand it first. Through the window, Thomas handed Victor a phone. Victor looked at the screen documentation, probably the beginning of the cooperative disclosure. He didn't react, just looked. Then he passed the phone to Gregor. Then he did something Emily hadn't seen him do once in the past 24 hours. He sat back, just sat back, shoulders dropping a fraction. The specific physical relief of a man who has been holding something at arm's length for a very long time and has finally carefully set it down. Emily looked away. That moment wasn't hers to watch. Mara, she said, when this is done tonight, tomorrow, whenever done, actually means I need to figure out what I do next. She kept her voice practical. I can't go back to the apartment, you said that. Marlowe's is, she didn't finish the sentence. The neon sign. 20 years. Gone. So I need to think about what comes after. Mara was quiet for a moment. Has he asked you yet? Emily looked at her. Asked me what? To stay? A beat. He barely knows me. He knew Irina for 3 years before he understood what she meant to him. Mara said it without any particular weight, just information. Victor is not a fast mover emotionally, but he is once he decides something completely certain. And he has been looking at you since the moment you poured his coffee in a way that I have not seen him look at anyone since. She stopped. Since me. Emily said nothing for a moment. I'm not Irina. He knows that. He's not looking for Irina. He's not looking for a replacement or a memory. Mara chose her next words carefully. He's looking for the first time in 3 years at the future instead of the past. And the future keeps having you in it. The door to the meeting room opened. Victor came out, behind him Gregor and Sasha. Thomas Weil remained inside with a man Emily didn't recognize, who had arrived 10 minutes ago, and who carried a leather briefcase with the particular purposefulness of legal counsel. Victor looked at Emily, then at Mara, then back at Emily. It's done, he said. Thomas, cooperating. It'll take several days to process everything fully, but the documentation is in hand. He paused. Kozlov's people have already been contacted. His end of the agreement is moving. He looked tired for the first time, genuinely tired, not controlled, exhaustion tired, but the tiredness of a man who has spent 3 years running towards something and has finally stopped. Come on, Emily said. Let's get out of here. He looked at her. You need to eat something, she said. You've had nothing since when did you last eat? He stopped, appeared to actually consider it. Yesterday. Yesterday, she repeated. You have been running an operation on no food and no sleep for, she looked at her watch. 27 hours. I'm aware of it, though. Victor. She used the particular tone she'd used on Denny, on the couple in the booth, on anyone who needed to be moved in a direction they weren't choosing for themselves. We are going to find somewhere that is open at 9 p.m. and you are going to sit down and eat an actual meal like a human person. Everything else can wait 1 hour. Gregor made a sound behind his hand. Victor looked at Emily with an expression that moved through several things and landed on something she could only describe as genuine, unguarded, uncalculated, just real. I don't take orders, he said. I know, she said. I'm not giving you one. I'm telling you what's happening next because I've been up for 27 hours too, and I'm hungry and I'm not doing it alone. It beat. All right, Ma, he said. Gregor made the sound again, clearer this time. Mara pressed her lips together firmly in the way of someone exercising significant self-control. They walked out of the airport together, Victor and Emily side by side, Gregor and Mara behind Sasha, a few steps to the side with her phone handling the threads that needed handling. The automatic doors opened onto the evening air, cool and ordinary. The city spread out ahead of them, doing its regular city things, entirely indifferent to the private earthquake that had just finished its last tremor inside that meeting room. Victor stopped on the sidewalk alone. Emily stopped beside him. He was looking at the city. The particular look of someone who has spent a long time seeing a place through one lens and is seeing it slightly differently now. She loved this city, he said, not loudly, just said it, like the thought had come up and he'd decided to let it be spoken instead of pressing it back down. Irina, she said it was ugly and loud and completely honest. She said it didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. He paused. I never understood what she meant. I found the city useful. That was the extent of my relationship with it. Emily looked at the city, ugly and loud, honestly itself. And now, he was quiet for a moment. Now, he said, I think I might be starting to. He looked at her. She looked back. Somewhere behind them, Mara found something extremely important to say to Gregor that required both of them to look in the opposite direction. Food, Emily said. Yes, Victor said. They walked. The case against Thomas Weil would take 3 weeks to complete, formally filed through channels that belonged to a world Emily was only beginning to understand. Kozlov's agreement held, he exited cleanly, quietly, and was not heard from again in any capacity that mattered. Pavel, after a conversation with Victor that lasted 2 hours and left both men looking like they'd gone 12 rounds, was given an ultimatum: 18 months of demonstrated loyalty or permanent severance. He chose the 18 months. Every day of it, he worked like a man, earning something back because he was. Sasha gave Emily the full account of Irina one afternoon, 3 weeks later, sitting at the kitchen table of the new apartment that Mara had arranged after the old safe house was decommissioned. She talked for 2 hours. Emily listened for all of it, asked nothing, and at the end said, "She sounds like someone worth knowing." She was, Sasha said. She would have said the same about you. What Emily didn't expect had not built into any version of the future she'd been quietly assembling during the quiet moments of the past weeks was the evening when Victor sat across from her at the same kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee between them, and didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to tell me what you actually think, not what you think I want to hear." "When have I ever told you what you wanted to hear?" she said, the ghost smile. "Never," he said. "That's why I'm asking." He looked at her steadily. "Stay," he said. "Not because of what happened, not because of what you know or what you saw or because it's safer inside than outside at this point." He paused. "Because I find that when I'm trying to think clearly about something difficult, I keep asking myself what you would say. And that has not happened to me in a very long time. And I believe it matters." Emily looked at him. The carved stone face, the measured words, the control that wasn't coldness, but discipline, all of it familiar. Now legible. Now the way you learned to read a language you didn't speak a month ago. She thought about Marlowe's, the neon sign, the frozen pizza, the show she'd never finished, the life that had been small and safe in hers. She thought about 27 hours that had rearranged everything. She thought about water and panic and the lesson her father had spent years trying to teach her, that you don't know what you're made of until you're tested. "I'm not Irina," she said, for the last time. "No," he said, "you're Emily Hart, and I am asking Emily Hart." She picked up her coffee. "I already stayed," she said. "I've been here 3 weeks." "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is," she said. "You just need to decide if you're going to accept it." He looked at her. She looked back. Outside, the city went about its loud, honest, ugly business. And inside, in the ordinary light of a kitchen that had been a safe house and was becoming something else entirely, the answer settled between them. Not dramatic, not announced, just real and quiet and solid. The way the best things usually are. 3 weeks after the warehouse, Kane resurfaced. Not dramatically. Not with a bomb or a team or any of the infrastructure that the Koslov Bratva had deployed before it. He resurfaced the way the most dangerous things do, quietly at the edge of peripheral vision, in a way that you almost missed if you weren't paying the particular kind of attention that Emily Hart had been paying since the night she'd learned that parking lots could kill you. She saw him on a Tuesday morning. She was walking back from the coffee shop 2 blocks from the apartment. Real coffee, the good kind, the ritual she'd built into the new version of her life, and she felt it before she saw it. The specific crawl across the back of her neck that she'd come to trust completely in the past 3 weeks. The body's alarm system, which had been recalibrated by one very long night into something considerably more sensitive than it used to be. She didn't stop walking, didn't look directly. She adjusted her grip on the coffee cups to always two now, which was its own quiet declaration, and used the reflection in a parked car's window to look behind her. He was half a block back. Dark jacket. The particular stillness of a man who is very good at looking like he isn't watching someone while watching someone. She recognized him from Gregor's files. Kane, the man who never failed to confirm a kill. She walked the rest of the 2 blocks at exactly the same pace. Into the building, up the stairs, through the door. Victor was at the table with his laptop and 3 stacked folders and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago because he'd forgotten it existed, which was a habit she was actively working on correcting. "Kane is outside," she said. She set his coffee in front of him and sat down with hers. Victor looked up. His expression didn't change. "How far back?" "Half a block when I came in. He'll move when he's ready. He's not rushing." "He's patient," Victor said. He closed the laptop. "He's been patient for 3 weeks. You knew he was still out there." "I knew." He looked at her steadily. "I didn't know he'd found this location." "He probably followed me from the coffee shop." She said it plainly. It was a fact, not an accusation. I should have varied my route. Yes, Victor said. Also plain. Also not an accusation. They'd gotten good at this, at the specific honesty of people who have been through enough together that softening the truth feels like an insult. He picked up his phone, called Gregor in 3 words. Set it down. He'll come to the building, Victor said. He'll want to confirm I'm here before he does anything. That gives us a window. How long, Mom? 20 minutes, maybe 30 if he's thorough. He stood up. He won't be anything but thorough. Emily looked at him, at the controlled face, the steady hands. 3 weeks had changed certain things and left other things exactly as they were. The control was still there, that would always be there. It was structural. It was load-bearing in the architecture of who Victor Hargrave was. But there was less distance in it now, less of the weaponized blankness she'd first read across a diner counter. He was still guarded. He was guarded the way a person who has been through real things is guarded, not as performance, but as honest self-knowledge. She'd stopped trying to change that. She'd started working with it instead. What do you need from me? She said. Stay away from the windows. He moved toward the equipment locker that still lived in the far wall because some things didn't change, regardless of how domesticated a space became. And don't tell Mara until after. She'll want to run the operation herself, and we don't have time to negotiate. Emily almost smiled. That's accurate. He opened the locker. She watched him move through the preparation with the efficiency of long practice, the particular economy of someone who has done dangerous things so many times, that the physical routine of it requires no thought, which frees the mind for everything that matters. She'd watched him do this before. In the first safe house in the warehouse at the airport, she'd learned to read the difference between preparation and panic, and Victor Hargrave had in her full observation never once panicked. He'll try to use me, she said suddenly. Victor turned. What? Kane. If he's been watching for 3 weeks, he knows I exist. He knows I'm connected to you in some way. He'll factor that in. She met Victor's eyes. So don't protect me at the expense of the actual situation. I can handle what comes. You know that? A long beat. I know that, he said. And I also know that it is significantly harder to be strategic when the variable in danger is someone you... He stopped, selected the next word with visible care. Someone you've chosen to keep close. Victor. I'm aware of my own psychology, Emily. I'm not unaware that it's a liability. It's not a liability, she said. It's human. There's a difference with Pavel. She stood up. And I'm telling you right now, don't make a bad decision for a good reason. Not for me. I won't forgive you for it. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said very quietly, she said something similar. Once. Emily held that, let it exist without flinching from it. What did she say? She said, don't carry me like a shill. It'll slow you down and get us both killed. His voice was even. She was right. She sounds like she was often right. Frequently annoying, we said. The two things were related. He turned back to the locker. Stay back from the windows. That's non-negotiable. Agreed, she said, and meant it. Gregor arrived in 11 minutes, which was fast enough that he must have been already close. Sasha came with him, which was either coincidence or the kind of operational telepathy that develops between people who've been through enough. They moved through the apartment with the quiet, coordinated efficiency that Emily had come to think of as the particular language of this group, a language she was still learning, but learning fast. He's in the building, Sasha said, checking her phone. Ground floor, the camera at the entrance. She stopped. What? Victor said. He's not alone. The room recalibrated in 1 second. How many? Gregor said. 3, maybe 4. Sasha's eyes moved over her screen. 1 stayed outside, 1 at the stairwell, Kane and at least 1 more moving up. He didn't come to confirm, Emily said. He came to finish it. Victor looked at her. She was right and they both knew it, and there wasn't time to have feelings about it. Sasha, Victor said. Secondary exit. Roof access is clear. I checked it when we came in habit. She looked at Emily. Roof to the adjacent buildings down 4 floors east, exit onto the side street. I can take Emily. I'm not leaving, Emily said. 3 people looked at her. We've had this conversation, she said, looking at Victor specifically. I told you don't make bad decisions for good reasons. Sending me out the roof splits your team by 1 person and gives Kane a moving target in a stairwell. I stay. I'm not a fighter, but I have 2 eyes and a phone, and I've been useful before. The silence lasted 4 seconds. She's right, Gregor said. He said it with the flat honesty of a man who doesn't offer compliments and doesn't offer false reassurance either, just assessments, accurate and clean. Victor looked at Emily one more time, the look that meant he was running the calculation. The look she'd watched him run a dozen times in the past 3 weeks, always the same process, always arriving at the same place when she was the variable, always costing him something. Mara's number is in your phone, he said. If anything goes wrong, any version, you call her and you tell her the situation and you do exactly what she says, not what you think, what she says. Understood. And Emily, he stopped. Something moved across his face, fast, honest, unperformed. You know what I'm going to say. Don't, she said. Say it after. He held her gaze for one more beat. Then he turned to Gregor. Positions. They moved. Emily went to the kitchen, central away from windows with sightlines to both the front door and the hallway. She pressed herself against the wall beside the refrigerator and held her phone and breathed in the deliberate, measured way that she'd learned in the water years ago in another life. Slow the heart down. Not because the danger isn't real, because a slow heart thinks better. She heard them before she saw anything. Footsteps in the hallway outside, careful, but not careful enough. 3 weeks ago, she wouldn't have noticed the particular weight distribution of people trying to move quietly. Now she counted 2 sets, maybe 3. The stairwell door, which Gregor had left slightly ajar for exactly this purpose, gave her the sound. Then a voice from the hallway, low directed, not at her, at whoever was moving with him. Kane's voice. She'd never heard it, but she knew it immediately, the way you know certain things without explanation. He's in there, Kane said. Second unit on the left. A pause. And the woman, they... Emily's hand tightened on the phone. Deal with her first, Kane said. She's the unpredictable one. Something crystalline and cold moved through her chest. Not fear exactly, more like the feeling before a race when the blocks are set and the water is right there and there is nothing left to do but commit. She'd been the unpredictable one since she grabbed a man by his collar over a counter at midnight, and her body had acted before her brain could veto it. She had no particular desire to stop being that. The door moved. What happened in the next 90 seconds was something Emily never described precisely to anyone afterward. Not because it was too violent, it wasn't, not really, not compared to the diner, not compared to the warehouse, but because the specifics of it were less important than the single fact at the center of it. She did not freeze. Not for a millisecond. Not even when Kane came through the door and turned directly toward the kitchen, and their eyes met across 12 feet of apartment, and she saw in his face the specific recalculation of a man who has found an unexpected variable exactly where he expected empty space. She threw the coffee cup. Full. Still hot. It wasn't a tactic. It wasn't training. It was the thing that was in her hand and the thing that Kane's face was not ready for. And the half second it took him to react to it, to dodge, to reorient, was the half second that Gregor needed to come through the hallway door at full speed and cover the distance between them. What followed was fast and loud, and then abruptly quiet. When the quiet came, Victor was standing in the center of the room. Kane was on the floor, restrained, breathing furious in the specific way of a man who is professionally humiliated. The man who'd come with Kane was in the hallway, similarly situated. The man at the stairwell had encountered Sasha, which had apparently not gone well for the man at the stairwell. The man outside had run, which Gregor said was the smartest decision anyone on Kane's team had made all evening. Victor looked at Emily. She was still against the refrigerator, both hands at her sides. Coffee cup gone somewhere on the floor in pieces, which she'd clean up later because some habits were apparently indestructible. You threw a coffee cup, Victor said. It was what I had. At a professional assassin. It worked, she said. Mostly. He looked at her for a long moment. Something in his face moved in a way she'd only seen a few times, the full release of something held at enormous tension for enormous time. Not collapse, not weakness, just the specific relief of a man who has been standing in a current for a very long time and has finally reached the other side of it. He crossed the room in 4 steps and took her face in both hands. And the thing she noticed in that moment was that his hands were completely steady. After everything, the bomb, the warehouse, the airport, 3 weeks of threading a needle in the dark, and now this, his hands were steady and his eyes were fully on her, and there was nothing calculated in his expression at all. After, she said, because she'd told him to say it after. After he agreed and said it. What he said was not long. It was not complicated. It was the kind of thing that men like Victor Hargraves say exactly once in a lifetime, and they say it with the full weight of everything they have spent years not saying, and it lands differently than the same words would from someone who dispenses them easily. She listened to every word, then she said, "I know." He looked at her. "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is," she said. "You just keep expecting me to speak a language I don't use." She held his gaze. "I threw a coffee cup at a professional assassin so Gregor could get to you in time. What do you think that means?" His hands were still on her face. "It means you are the most reckless person I have ever trusted," he said. "Coming from you," she said, "that's a tremendous compliment." Gregor in the hallway said something to Sasha in a voice carefully pitched not to carry. Sasha made a sound that was almost certainly a laugh suppressed with effort. The legal dismantling of what Cain represented took longer than the physical part. Cain, it turned out, was more valuable intact than dispose of a fact that Victor and Gregor worked out in the measured pragmatic vocabulary of people who have learned to see human beings as pieces on a board even when they'd personally prefer to see them as something else. Cain knew things. Cain had been running operations for the Bratva for 11 years and had in his head an architecture of activity that the right people, the official, legal badge-carrying kind of right people, would find extremely useful. A deal was brokered, evidence changed hands. Cain went somewhere that was not prison, but was also not free, which was the particular compromise available to men who had too much information to be discarded and too much culpability to be released. Emily learned about the deal 2 days later from Mara at the kitchen table over the coffee that was always present in the apartment, now the way good things become constant when someone decides to make them so. "He's not going to explain all of it to you," Mara said. "That's not withholding. It's just not how he operates." "I know," Emily said. "You're comfortable with that." Emily considered it honestly. "I'm comfortable with who he is. Who he is includes not explaining everything." She wrapped her hands around the mug. "I'm not looking for a translator. I'm looking at the actual person." Mara studied her for a moment. "You know what Sasha said to me after the warehouse, after all of it?" "What?" "She said Victor's been moving in one direction for 3 years, straight toward the thing that killed Irina, like a man walking into a headwind. Head down, not looking sideways. And then one night a waitress grabbed him by the collar and pulled him sideways, and somehow that was exactly what needed to happen." Mara paused. "She said it like it was random, like it was luck." "It was luck," Emily said. "I was only there because I needed the money." "Maybe," Mara said. "Or maybe the right person in the right moment always looks like luck from the outside." Emily looked at her coffee. "What does it look like from the inside?" Mara smiled, a real one, the warm, private smile of a woman who had watched this particular man for 13 years and had stopped expecting to be surprised by him and had then been surprised. "From the inside," she said, "it looks like someone choosing to be paying attention when everyone else has stopped." The hearing for Thomas Weil was scheduled for a Thursday in late November. Victor didn't attend. His legal team handled it with the efficient invisibility that expensive counsel provides. He told Emily about it the evening before briefly, and she listened and nodded and asked one question. "Are you ready for it to be over?" He thought about it, actually considered the question rather than deflecting it, which was itself evidence of the distance they'd traveled from the man who had sat at a diner counter and said insurance with the blankness of someone who'd stopped letting words carry weight. "I don't know if it ends," he said. "I know that what I was carrying, the wrong version of it, the story where I failed her because I looked the wrong direction, I know that part is done." He paused. "What stays is just the truth. She found something real. She paid for it. The people responsible are answering for it." Another pause. "That's the most you get usually, the full accounting, not the restoration." Emily looked at him. But, he said, and the ghost smile came quieter and more real than she'd ever seen it. 3 years ago, I would not have believed that the full accounting would feel like anything at all. I thought it would be just another transaction. A closed file. He looked at her. It doesn't feel like a closed file. What does it feel like? Like something ended so something else could start. He said it carefully like a man testing weight bearing. Then satisfied it held, like I'm looking in the right direction again. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He turned his hand and held hers with the same steadiness that she'd come to know as his fundamental nature, not the absence of feeling, but the presence of something strong enough to hold feeling without being broken by it. They sat like that for a while, the city outside being exactly what Irina had described, loud and ugly and completely stubbornly honest. Denny called on a Friday 6 weeks after the diner. He'd found a new kitchen to work in, better hours, better pay a chef who didn't yell. He said it like an apology, and Emily told him it wasn't one. He asked if she was okay in the way that people ask when they're not sure they want the full answer. I'm good, Denny, she said. I'm actually good. You sound different, he said. I am different, she said, but the good kind. A pause. Is it safe, whatever you're, safer than it was, she said. That's all I can tell you. Okay, another pause. You know, that night in the kitchen, I still don't totally understand what happened. I know, she said. That's probably for the best. He laughed. It sounded like the kitchen at Marlowe's, like grease and fluorescent light and the specific late-night warmth of a place that had been her whole world for 3 years and was now something she carried instead of something she lived inside. She could carry it. That was all right. After she hung up, Victor was in the doorway, jacket on, watching her with that look, the one that had started as assessment and had become something she couldn't fully name but recognized completely. Ready, he said. They had somewhere to be. Nothing dangerous, a meeting legitimate and boring, the kind that comprised the majority of Victor's actual professional life, which was considerably less cinematic than the week she'd met him and considerably more functional. She'd been learning that too. The architecture of his world on an ordinary day. The difference between who he was in a crisis and who he was when the crisis had passed. She liked both versions. She told him that once, and he'd looked at her like she'd said something in a language he was only beginning to speak. She'd given him time. He was getting there. Ready, she said. She stood up and he held the door, and they walked out together into the loud, ugly, honest city that was now, without her having planned it, or predicted it, or chosen it in any conscious sense, home. Not because of what she'd survived, not because of what had been built in the fire of one very long night and the weeks that followed it, but because of the simpler, stranger, more durable truth underneath all of it. She had been paying attention when it mattered, and so had he. And from nothing more complicated than two people seeing each other clearly in a bad moment and continuing to look, everything else had followed. She hadn't gone back to Marlowe's. There was nothing to go back to, but she'd driven past the block once on a gray afternoon when she needed to put something to rest, and she'd looked at the empty lot where the neon sign used to be, and she'd thought that was one life. And then she'd driven on. This was another one. Louder, more dangerous, more complicated, more alive. She had chosen it the moment she grabbed a stranger by the collar and pulled him out of the way of a bomb, before she knew his name, before she knew anything except that her body had decided this mattered. She had been right. She was still right. And Emily, a Hart former waitress, current variable, the one unpredictable thing that no one had factored into their calculations, walked forward into it without hesitation, without apology, and without ever once looking back.